people in general are more willing to let themselves down than they are to let other people down. It's very easy to allow things to get in the way when you're not as focused as you should be. I mean, just say it's not a priority. Like, there's no shame in that, but don't lie.
The way of the superior man is about always living your highest purpose. And that is the number one thing. And it's like, you have your family, you have other things, but that is the ultimate thing. Like, everything else should be enhancing that.
You can't be too quick to let those things go for the sake of somebody else. I think that if it's really meant to be, you should be able to continue going down the path.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I have my very special guest, my good friend, the Hebrew Hammer, Aleks Salkin himself. So Aleks came on the show with me today because we were talking about something he's never talked about on camera before. He's been a strength coach for over 10 years. I met him a decade ago at Easy Strength. He's been all around the world teaching and coaching kettlebells, body weight, original strength, and he's been a huge, massive success. But today we're talking about something, as I mentioned, that he's never spoken about on camera before, which was really his journey where he almost left this field of strength and conditioning, going in a completely different route, and what it was that actually kept him going in this world to make him the success that he is today. Really amazing story of perseverance, about really going through the trials and the tribulations that happen in being a solo business person in the strength and conditioning world. And it was just really inspiring to hear his story from it. I know you're gonna love it and you'll take a lot out of it, okay? All right, we'll get right to it. Enjoy the show. I'll catch you on the inside.
What's up? Here we are. Aleks, what's up, man? It's good to see you, and you have a beautiful shirt on.
Yeah, thank you. We were just discussing this before. You know, I was a little bit reticent at first to go on because we're wearing the same outfit. I'm assuming you're wearing jeans as well. I haven't really seen, but
I am not, just black pants. So
yeah.
Okay.
So we look different enough. That's fine. Right now you've got on like the spy sneaking around kind of clothes. You just need like some sort of a mask to put on, like some gloves, and then maybe one of those things you listen to, like a safe cracker.
Ooh.
And you're basically going to be like Ethan Hunt and Mission Impossible.
Oh, there we go. Right there. Yeah. The Men in Black edition. There we go right here. So
correct.
Exactly. Well, dude, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you having me. I was just on your podcast a few weeks back when we chatted a lot, which was awesome. And, one of the things we were talking about off air last time was, your story of how you kind of almost got out of this business from just kind of trial and error stuff. And then some serendipitous things happened. So I'm going to ask you about that story for people who are maybe unaware of who you are, if they didn't listen to the last podcast we did with Breakthrough Secrets. If you can just introduce yourself of, who you are, what you do, and how you got into this business.
Sure. First of all, if you've never heard of me, for shame.
How
dare you? It's interesting because I didn't actually think I got into the fitness business, would have been, I guess, technically speaking, like in October of 2010, because that was the time I went through my RKC. And prior to that, I had even actually during it, I had no intention of working as a personal trainer. I did it more as like a personal challenge to myself. And my original plan was to become a linguist. And I was like, by the time I became an RKC, I had still not yet finished my college degree, which was in English with a focus on writing and linguistics. And I remember getting to that point, like got the bachelor's degree. I had such tunnel vision on getting that. I didn't think about anything past it, but I assumed, I was like, all right, I'm going to go get a master's degree in linguistics and whatever. So I finished it. And I remember I was kind of like, I don't even know what to do with it. I don't have any plans. I don't really have any nothing set in stone. I'm not like enrolled at a different school to do my master's degree. And I remember talking to this one professor who, now, if you're interested in the field of biblical archaeology, you would have almost certainly heard this guy's name because he is like extraordinarily famous in that world. Again, outside of it, you probably never heard of him, but his name is Rami Arav. And of all places, he teaches at University of Nebraska at Omaha. I don't know why, it's like whatever, but for those who are interested, he was the guy who in like the mid 80s decisively and definitively proved the location of Bethsaida, which is a town. It's the fourth most mentioned town in the New Testament, I am told. And there had been some speculation prior to that as to where it was located, but he took a team there and like, bam, within like a week or 10 days, he was able to prove it. So in any case, I had spoken to him before because I had one last humanities credit that I had to do. My options were either do one more semester where I had to drag myself to the university to go through another humanities course in order to get my degree, or find some sort of a loophole by which I could get that humanities credit without having to take another class while still paying my dues to the university. And so what I discovered was that the university, and this is going to tie into the answer, by the way, just so you know, but because we're going to be talking about a lot of things on air that I've never talked about publicly, you're going to be getting like the exclusive story. And I want you to I want you to get all of the story. I looked through the roster. Back then it was in paper, I don't know, or maybe not. Maybe it was actually, it was online, but they had, as a humanities course, one of the options was to take a different foreign language. And I took Spanish at the university. So I couldn't take another Spanish course, but I could take a different foreign language. And I already spoke fluent Hebrew. And so I was like, I think they used to have Hebrew classes. Let me see if I can find that. And they didn't offer them anymore, but they were still technically on the books. So what I did was I asked somebody at the registrar's office, and like, is there some way that I could take like a Hebrew test, which I knew I was going to ace. I was like, is there some way I could take a Hebrew test and then have that counted as a humanities? And they said, yeah, you just have to find someone who can administer it, basically. And so there was another Israeli professor that I talked to earlier in the year, but because I like to wait to the last minute, I waited to the last minute. And so I ended up talking to a different one. This was Rami Arav. And I went to his office, and we had spoken before because we'd bumped into each other at the Arts and Sciences Hall at their the kind of the front desk area. And I asked him, we sat and talked in his office for 30 minutes. I had to brag slightly because it was all in Hebrew. And I, in the end, I asked, like, okay, so would you be willing to administer like a test for me? He goes, yeah, just write about your experience living on the kibbutz. A kibbutz is like a commune, basically. In Israel, I lived in a commune for like 6 months in 2009, and this was 2010, so it was still fresh in my mind. He's like, 500 words. I will read through it, grade it, and then we'll get it, put into the system. So I did that, finished all that stuff up, and because I had built this rapport with him, and I'd gotten my humanities credit, it was December of 2010. I'd finished my degree, and I was feeling kind of lost. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And so, because he and I had gotten to know each other, I asked him if I could have a meeting with him because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next with my career. I was still pretty sure I wanted to be in academia, but now it was like 50% sure as opposed to like 90%, And I said, I was thinking about taking a year off because I've just been going to school like nonstop basically since kindergarten. So why not? And he said, don't take a year off because 1 year will turn into 10 years. And then you won't get your master's degree until, you're like, whatever, like 35. And then, by the time you get your PhD, you'll be like 40, and then it'll be impossible for you to find a job because people are going to be like, well, we don't know what he did for 10 years. He just kind of disappeared. He said, but if you do a master's degree next, and then you do your PhD, you could be done by the time you're 30, and then you could get a job in academia. He said, you could get a master's degree in linguistics from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem because they would accept your degree from UNO. He said, and then you could go to the University of Chicago, which has a really good Semitic languages department. They said, and you could get your PhD in Semitic linguistics, and because they would accept a degree from Hebrew University, they wouldn't accept it from University of Nebraska at Omaha. They said, you'd be done by age 30, you could get a job, and you could be on your way in academia. And I was like, I don't really want to do any of that stuff. Like, none of that just sounds appealing to me. And so I really had to think about it. I was like, I don't want to write articles that no one's going to read for journals that nobody reads. And there has to be something, better that I can do with my time. And at this point, I'd already gotten certified as an RKC, again, as a personal goal for myself. Like I wanted to do it because I grew up very timid, kind of very shy, unsure of himself. And through just pure happenstance, and this, again, it goes back to university, oddly enough, I got a job in direct sales through a company called Vector Marketing, which is most famous for running the Cutco operations. So if you're familiar with Cutco, especially if you're in the Midwest, you're probably
blast from the past in the Cutco.
Yeah, baby. Well, it's funny because I was always told I would be good in sales. Like when I worked at a fast food restaurant when I was in college, and the manager was always like, because I was always very friendly, really good with people. And he was like, you'd be great in sales, And so now, as a complete side note here, one time, this is one thing, I have very few regrets in life. I regret this. One time he was like, hey, what are you doing on, it was like Thursday. He's like, I've got 2 tickets to, there's going to be a big convention in town and Zig Ziglar is going to be speaking there. And I was like, I've got class, I really don't want to miss class or whatever. And I knew Zig Ziglar's name. I just didn't realize what a big deal he was.
Right.
And it wouldn't be until Zig Ziglar will come back into the picture a little bit later, but it wouldn't be until probably 2016 where I started listening to Zig Ziglar every single morning as like part of a morning routine, taking notes and like trying to absorb the lessons. And I just was like, this is 2005. And I just had the opportunity to hear him speak live. Who knows what would have happened, Mike? So everything could have been different for me. But no, but I ended up skipping out. It was kind of a bummer because I think it would have been great. But my foray into sales ended up being when I tore off a little tab on a piece of paper. It said $15 an hour base pay, direct sales job. So I called up, I set up an appointment, and it was for Cutco. And I had heard of Cutco before. I didn't know a whole lot about it. Interestingly enough, my dad, when I told him about it, he's like, "Oh, I used to sell Cutco, like back in the day." So it was like a generational thing. I just didn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, but it was very, very difficult for me because a lot of people tell you no. And when you're not used to hearing that, no sounds like F you, like it's not what people were saying, but
very personal.
Yes, exactly. It seems like they're saying no to you. They're really saying no to the product, or, maybe your presentation didn't make it clear enough what the benefits were or whatever. But I did this to help kind of pay my way through Israel, where I was going to study on the kibbutz. I was going to study Hebrew so I can improve my Hebrew. So now this is kind of like, this is a Pulp Fiction like approach to storytelling, because I'm kind of like bouncing back but I stuck through because I really liked my manager, Dane, and he was always very encouraging. He was very very helpful, and I didn't want to quit because I didn't want to let him down. And so I was like, and realistically, I also didn't want to let myself down, but people in general are more willing to let themselves down than they are to let other people down. So for the 3 months leading up to what ended up being my 6-month foray at the kibbutz, I was selling Cutco, and I got better. I ended up as one of the top salesmen in the office. By top salesman, I mean there's like 20 top salesmen. I was like the 20th. But I was on the board.
Yep.
And so anyway, what was really interesting is that I went through this transformation when I was selling Cutco. And the transformation was that I could accept rejection and I could roll with it. And I got this new sense of self-confidence. Now, it's not like I never had to deal with frustration or being upset about rejection or difficulties in the job or anything like that. But it did mean that I now had a new sense of my own abilities. Like I was doing things that I never thought possible. Like I realized, in fact, there was one thing that they taught us to do. Like they were very smart about the way that they approached teaching people who were just, wet behind the ears. They teach you how to go through the presentations, because there's a whole system set up around them. And then asking for the order, they have a certain series of things that you have to do. And then as the weeks go by, they teach you some more kind of advanced techniques that you can use. Because the other thing is that you also start off with seeing your family members or your friends' parents and, stuff like that, which is good because it's like, these are people and you're not as likely to encounter. It's going to be easier for you to find out what works, what doesn't work. And then, you at the end, you always ask for referrals.
Right.
And so one of the things they taught us to do was what they called the alley-oop. I don't know anything about basketball, but I am told that there is some sort of a resemblance. Basically, what you would do is you would ask for the referrals, And then they would write the referrals down. And then you would say, okay, now who do you think would be home now that we might be able to call, just so that you can let them know that I'm going to call them. And they would say, oh, okay, maybe this person. So you would call, or they would call. And then while they were on the call, you just kind of put your hands up to the phone, like, can I talk to them? And then you get on the call, and then you talk to them and you set up the appointment. So you're not spending the next day like trying to chase people down and set up appointments. And I remember that by the time I was doing that, I was like, because I got a number of appointments like that. And I was like, oh my God, like a couple months ago, I never could have done that. So this is where a huge turning point happened, is eventually, because my coach, Scott Stevens, who, by the way, he would be a very good person to have on the show because he's an extraordinarily interesting guy. But he, from the very beginning, was encouraging me to become an RKC. And I was like, nah, I couldn't do that, man. Like, that's 3 days of just like torture. I couldn't do it. But by the time I was able to do all these other things that I didn't previously think I could do, I was like, I can convince a complete stranger to let me come over to their house with a bag full of sharp knives, and they'll do it. Like, of course I can do a snatch test. Of course I can pass the RKC. Like, I owe it to myself to do this. So it became a personal challenge for myself. It wasn't a career path as I saw it, but it was a personal challenge. And then now we get back to the, finishing up the degree thing, right? I had this certification as a kettlebell instructor. At this point, I was working as a waiter at a Mexican restaurant. So that's kind of how I was making most of my living. And I started to there was a gal, I put my profile up on Dragon Door's website, and a gal who lived not terribly far from me reached out because she had read The 4-Hour Body, and she was captivated by Tracy Rifkin's incredible 110, 120 pound weight loss.
Yep.
Just through kettlebell swing.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I want to learn the kettlebell swing. And so I was like, okay, well, great. I'll be happy to come over and train you. And so we would do, I think once or twice a week, I would come over, I'd bring my kettlebells, and I would train her, and I was making like, I think $40 or $50 an hour, which was like a huge leap forward
at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, it was like just unthinkable. And then when I was working at this Mexican restaurant, one of my coworkers, a gal named Jamie, said, oh, you know what? I know this couple. They're looking to do some in-house fitness classes for themselves. And would you be interested in talking to them? And I was like, well, yeah, absolutely. So I started taking on them as clientele as well. And I was really enjoying it. I really found like, I'm making a difference by helping people to get stronger and move better. And I was learning a lot about how to really teach. Because, in the certifications, like, you technically learn the progressions, but it's not until you're really out in the real world that you kind of really learn how to teach people,
yes.
En masse as it is. And that's just the way that it is. It's not a criticism of the system. And then, along the way, I picked up another student who it was the wife of a friend of mine, and I would meet up and train. And she was she got really into kettlebell training, and so she's like, I should try to get my boss, and I'm going to try to get my boss to get into this. I'm going to try to convince her. And so she set up a meeting with her. And I should mention that she worked at a local TV station. And the boss was like the regional manager in charge of all sorts of TV stations. So I ended up training the boss. And she was like 50 years old, petite, had never really done strength training before. Took her, from not being very strong to being able to do multiple chin-ups in a row, like legit full, like dead hang at the bottom, all like chin over the top, really cool stuff. And eventually started up a group fitness class in the TV station. And at this point, I was like, okay, I've got a lot of momentum built up. And I was still making good money at the Mexican restaurant, but I was like, you know what? If I don't make a move now, the momentum is going to slow down eventually. So I quit working at the Mexican restaurant and started just doing training full time. And by this point, this is about 2012, 2012, kind of end of 2012. Yeah, roughly thereabouts. Midway through, I believe, actually. And then in early 2013, I made Aliyah, meaning I became a citizen of Israel. And so I moved to Israel, and everybody told me I shouldn't do it. My parents didn't. My parents were supportive, but I had friends who were like, look, like your brand is starting to grow here in the US, like people have heard of you now, like you're making a big mistake if you move. And I was like, maybe they're right, but probably not. So I'm not going to listen. And so I moved to Israel, and it was a bumpy path on the way. Definitely was, because it's not, being an immigrant, surprise, surprise, is not easy. Like, doesn't matter where. It's just a lot that goes into it. And then I started my career in Israel, and really that's when things took off. Not immediately. I mean, it took probably about a year of trying to hit the ground running and mostly rolling and tumbling. But by the time I got in the foothold, I felt like I was unstoppable.
It's crazy that you can, in hearing your story, you can trace your going into the RKC and that challenge directly from direct sales in Cutco knives.
Yeah.
Because I had a cousin who I remember when he was young, I said, get into direct sales and get a restaurant job at some point. Like if everybody does those two jobs, like you can learn a lot about yourself and how quickly that you can overcome objectives really fast, from that. And it's kind of fascinating that you kind of built up a little bit of the callus in your mind of that challenge of just being, because RKC, especially back then, from now, I mean, the curriculum of getting into StrongFirst, I don't know much about RKC as much because I moved over in 2012, same as you. But back then, I mean, a lot of people went just for the challenge of it. They weren't like, I remember like probably, 30, 40 out of the 100 people that were at my first certification, they were just students of people who just wanted to accept the challenge. They weren't coaches trying to make this a career, because it was a weekend of like, can I overcome? Can I hold up to all of the shit that's going to come at me from Pavel and from all those guys, which was kind of really, they called it the rite of passage. It was kind of really interesting. So it is funny how like your sales work from that actually kind of sparked all this into, the next venture of business and into the career now.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that too, because I remember going there and thinking like, wow, people are actually going to become coaches. Like, I think instinctively I knew that I wasn't there for that purpose. And so, and there were people who are already coaches and that sort of a thing. But in my mind, the way I saw it was that it was like the Russian Kettlebell challenge. It was there to be like a challenge where you prove yourself. Yes. And so, yeah, it really was not on my mind to become a trainer at that time, but it ended up being the thing that I would do. But yeah, it's very true. People went there because they wanted the challenge, and obviously people wanted to become coaches too. But it's funny. I remember. I hope I can track the video down one day. But back then, Amanda Salas, who is now a big time anchor in Los Angeles. Actually, she was at the time the head of Dragon Door TV. So she was like she had a reporter, I think a reporting background and journalistic background. And so one of the things she would do, I believe on the side, I don't think it was her full-time gig, was Dragon Door TV. And so they would do these certifications, and then, she and her cameraman would come in. And I remember she interviewed me. She said, "What are you looking forward to the most?" And I said, "All the pain." And it's funny because now I wouldn't say that, because I'm like, like, oh God, like I don't want to be so sore I can't move in the morning. But back then it was just kind of like, like throw me into the fire and I'm gonna come out of it, sharper on the other end.
Yes, it was interesting back then. And that's why I love talking to you, because you kind of started a similar path that I did, like like in 2010. And I remember like that first one, we had, 70 plus or 80 plus instructors, and they would bring they call them the victims on the last day, where you had to come in and actually work with people like in this little gym. To see that now would be like insane. You have people swinging kettlebells, like, 70 plus instructors, plus they're working with at least another person. So 140, 150 people. And you're trying to instruct in this small little area right here. It was like half madness from there, but it all worked out. We all got strong. Everybody did a great job. So it was definitely interesting.
I really liked the victims training. My understanding is they really can't do it anymore, just because like legal wise, there's just a lot of liability that comes with it, because you just don't know who's coming in. But it was great while that era lasted.
It is. Well, and it's interesting because I mean, now the curriculum now going into level one, I mean, it's still, just as challenging in many ways. It was very different. There was a militaresque almost feeling to the original RKC,
Yeah.
which was funny. So, but now that so you moved to Israel, you had a brand going on in Omaha, and then you
Yep.
moved to Israel, working it up. And then there got to a part, as you said, where you're almost, I don't know if it was a burnout. I don't know if it was just looking at what you wanted to do, but you almost got out of this business.
Yeah.
And then some stuff happened of meeting some people and kind of trying it one more time,
Yeah.
which turned into a pretty interesting story.
Yeah. Well, the fit almost hit the shan, so to speak.
Okay. Yes.
Basically, So, okay. So I'll pick things back up. So now when I moved to Israel in 2013, I was living in Haifa. And Haifa is a really nice city on the Mediterranean coast and up north in Israel. And I was in what was called like an immigrant absorption center. And I was one of the very few who really spoke good Hebrew. But so a lot of people who were there, part and parcel of it was like an intensive Hebrew language program. And so again, to toot my own horn just a little bit, I tested into the highest level of Hebrew that they had. But it was actually a level that I had gone through at the kibbutz. It was basically the same thing. So for me, it was like 5 hours a day in a classroom where I was like, I understood everything. And I would write down new vocabulary words as they came along, but I knew all the grammatical concepts. Like I'm a geek about languages. I really like foreign languages a lot.
Did you grow up speaking Hebrew, or did you just pick it up, really quickly?
Oh, well, we'll go on a quick sidebar here. No, I actually taught myself how to speak Hebrew. Now I did have Hebrew lessons as a kid. I went to Hebrew school, and so I learned the rudiments of Hebrew. Like, I knew the alphabet. I knew like the diacritical marks that tell you how to pronounce it, because Hebrew is a language that doesn't have written vowels. Now there are certain letters that kind of quasi function as vowels for anybody who really cares to know. But generally speaking, the vowel mark is, if you were to read an Israeli newspaper, unless it's something where the word might have an alternate meaning, they don't include the vowel marks. Everything is vowel free. So you just have to kind of know how it sounds. Like if there's a song by Fall Out Boy called "Thanks for the Memories," and they wrote it without vowels, for instance. So if you go and look it up online, you'll see "Thanks for the Memories," but it's written without vowels. And that's essentially what reading in Hebrew is like,
Gotcha.
So there are vowel sounds, but just not written. And so, so in any case, I knew the rudiments. And when I started college in 2004, I decided, the world is just too exciting to go around speaking only one language. I really want to learn. I want to improve my Hebrew. And so I had a creative writing teacher. My first class of my college career was like early September 2004. And she said, just take out a loose leaf piece of paper, because this was before everybody had some sort of a screen that they could, stare into all the live long day. And she's like, just write anything. I just want you, this is your time to write. So I wrote the alphabet, or the Hebrew alphabet. And so from there it kind of grew, and I ended up, I made a decent amount of progress. I looked around on the internet to try to find better resources, and I found a book called How to Learn Any Language by Barry Farber, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. I mean, he was in his 90s, so it's not unexpected or anything, but he was a real language fanatic. He spoke like 26 languages to varying degrees of fluency, some of them very fluently, others more conversationally, but read his book, really devoured it. And then like from there, it was like I took steroids laced with crack times speed, when it came to my Hebrew learning.
Nice cocktail. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. It was like an 8-ball directly into my language learning ability. And so, the summer of 2005, I learned an extraordinary amount using his system. And and it was just something I was really passionate about. So I actually learned how to speak it on my own. I would not recommend that to anybody, because if you're young and you've got the time and the passion, it's easy. Now it's just so much easier to get outside help, like hire a tutor. I just didn't have the ability. I would have loved to, but there was no way to do that online. Like I have, it's very easy to find language tutors online now, especially in foreign countries where you may not have to pay all that much and you still get really quality training. I was a real dweeb about studying Hebrew. So when I was on the kibbutz, we'll go back to that briefly, I tested into the highest level that they had there, which was called Kita Dalet, which means just class D, basically. Or fourth grade, you might say. Like, it doesn't sound impressive, but there aren't too many levels of Hebrew after that. So it was actually pretty good. And that was basically what they had at the Immigrant Absorption Center in 2013. It's about 4 years after the fact. And I ended up, at the midterm, it was like I was done in 30 minutes, and it was like a 4-hour test. So this actually is not me bragging. It's like if you were to take a test intended for people who are English language learners, you would probably blow through it very quickly too.
Right.
But I came like very well prepared. But after I left there, my plan was to go to Tel Aviv and live in Tel Aviv and be a personal trainer there. The thing, I just didn't really have any connections in Tel Aviv, oddly enough. Now, through a series of just very lucky happenstances, somebody recommended to me. It was actually a colleague recommended one of his old students, who recommended somebody that she knew to me. It was a woman who had grown up in the U.S. and moved to Israel when she was a bit older, named Deida. She was a physical therapist, and she wanted to learn how to use kettlebells. So I was like, okay, well, I'm in Haifa, and she was in Jerusalem. In fact, just outside Jerusalem. So I was like, yeah, just come up to Haifa and I'll teach you. And that's like a 2-hour drive. So I mean, like, she really, was very, very devoted.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember training her kind of like by the beach side, and we struck up a great conversation. And she kind of started to nudge me to move to Jerusalem. And I was like, yeah, probably not. So got toward the end of my time in Haifa, and I was looking for jobs in Tel Aviv, and I didn't have the requisite credentials, because you have to have like a very specific certificate from like their physical education school called Wingate. And I didn't have that. And so it's like, nobody's going to hire you if you don't have that. And so I was like, I posted something on Facebook, like, hey, does anybody know of any job openings for a personal trainer in Tel Aviv? She messaged me. She's like, well, what about Jerusalem? And she's like, if you come here, I can recommend my old physical therapy clients to you. And at this point, like I had started with Original Strength before it was even called Original Strength. Back then, it was still called Becoming Bulletproof. And I had been at the second ever workshop that they offered. And so I did Primal Move too. So I knew a bit about, the human movement and that sort of a thing. And she knew that, and she saw that plus my understanding of the importance of proper movement and good technique, and thought that I would be a good candidate to move to Jerusalem. And so I thought, all right, fine. But I knew it was going to take time to build it up. So I did what anybody would do. And she told me, I know somebody who runs a French restaurant in Jerusalem, like the fanciest restaurant in Jerusalem. She's like, you can work there until you get on your feet with, personal training. And I was like, but she's like, I'll make the connection so that you can talk to the owner. The owner was a guy who, very nice guy, was willing to give me a shot. And I'm not going to go into all the story about the restaurant, but I was miserable. It was nothing that it had nothing to do with the owner, had nothing to do with the staff. They were all great, but it was like, I'm here for a reason. I want to try to strengthen the Jewish nation and people.
Right.
And I'm not going to do that by serving overpriced French food. No offense. I'm not mentioning the rest. Nobody can get offended. But I remember for like 2 months, I was just like completely miserable. And, but eventually the people started coming in. She started sending me more and more people who would actually, were very interested in doing some training. And I quit the restaurant after like 2 months. And I had nothing. This was not like when I was working at the TV station and my first check was for like $2,000, for the group fitness thing, where it's like, okay, I've never seen a check that big at the time. This time, I mean, it was like, I had enough money saved up from, that I could live off of for a little while from the US, like not even from the restaurant, because I made just so unbelievably little, and again, it's not talking trash about the restaurant. I didn't work full time. It was part-time. Right. It was, worked on tips, and I sucked as a waiter there because I just did not want to be there. And so it was like, I mean, legit, probably from, I want to say end of 2013 throughout almost the entirety of 2014 was just it sucked. I mean, it was a grind, just not all that much fun. I mean, I had to scrimp for everything, but by 2015, I had really hit my stride, and in 2015, things picked up really quickly. And I had this kind of unspoken policy that if anybody ever asked me if I would teach a workshop somewhere, I would just say yes. And as luck would have it, I was very in demand in 2015 for teaching workshops. And so my friend Pavel Macek, have you had him on the show yet?
I've talked to him a couple times on Breakthrough Secrets, and we're going to get him back on at this one. For that, one of the greatest guys I've ever talked to in my life.
Yeah, he's
unbelievable.
No, he's in every sense of the word. Actually, he's phenomenal. In fact,
Yes,
he brought me out to the Czech Republic to teach about straight arm strength training, like gymnastics style strength training, and so put together a workshop manual, put together like a curriculum that we're going to cover, just some basic straight arm strength movements. And first day sold out. And so we opened up a second day, and that one didn't quite sell out, but it was very close. I mean, it was just like a very, very, very popular offering. And so I got a chance to go out there and teach. And I had been out there to teach once before. I had been to Prague before because I went there for my birthday in 2014. I had met Pavel prior to that because he and I were at the SFG II. We did our SFG II together in Italy. And so I met him there and met him again in Prague for my birthday, and then met him again a month later for the first original strength workshop in Europe. I was teaching with Geoff Neupert and Joe Sanzalone. They did a great job. I sucked. I was like a complete wreck. I just, I was
a couple of great guys to tag on with, though. Like they're
well, that's why they were just like such like giants,
Yes.
And and so Geoff talked to me afterward and kind of helped me figure out how to teach a little better in front of a crowd the size that we had there, because it was just but even prior to that, I take that back. Okay, that was the first time. And then in May of 2015, that was in 2014. May of 2015, Pavel had me out to teach the gymnastics to the people, as we called it. We did this straight arm strength training. From there, a guy from Bratislava in Slovakia was like, "Would you like to teach this in Slovakia as well?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? Let's be in touch." And then I had somebody reach out from Australia. It was like, "Hey, do you want to teach some calisthenics in Australia?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? Let's do it." So I was abroad a lot of times in 2015, and things were going very well. And as the old saying goes, when things are going very well, there's only one thing that you can do, and that's screw it up. And so I proceeded to do that, and it was not something that I had, like with anything, it's something that it kind of happens like slowly over time. And maybe I didn't even tell you what the nature of it was. I think maybe I just told you kind of like the end of
yeah, you told me the result. To pause it really quick on that, like around this time in 2015, was this type of training, was it relatively just new to the area a lot, and kind of taking advantage of an opportunity like that? Because
go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
No, I'm thinking through it just because, I mean, I've kept as into the community as possible since I've been here of stuff. And I know, StrongFirst Italy got huge, and a lot of this I didn't know of OS with that, which is a fascinating program. I got a chance to talk to Tim Anderson, as I told you, which is fantastic. But it seemed like right around that time, like the middle of the 2010s was when, especially in Europe, a lot of this stuff started to blow up a lot. Like I got a chance to work with Bruno Castro in 2016 in Brazil, and everything was blowing up down there in South America. And I think that all stemmed because everything was going crazy in Europe at the time.
That very well could be. I'm not really 100% sure. What I think a lot of it has to do with is that, like, keep in mind, like straight arm strength training was not like a hit around the board, because the average person just doesn't know what it is. But in our niche, it certainly was. There was like a time when there was an increased amount of interest. And I guess I don't really know what precipitated it. Like I had gotten into straight arm strength training in probably the earliest would have been in earnest, let's say in 2011, because I started doing a lot of like L-sit work, and I was doing some other calisthenics stuff that was very like people just hadn't really seen it before. And because I had read Convict Conditioning 2, which was, I mean, I have to say, I think it's Paul Wade's best in the series. Like all the Convict Conditioning books are really good. Convict Conditioning 2 is like, I really think it's his magnum opus. Again, like I said, the ones that he wrote after that and the one he wrote before, phenomenal. That one was just like the peak.
If he really exists. So.
Yeah, exactly. I actually, I do think he does, and I can't tell you why on the air, but I can give you a pretty convincing reason why off the air. I'm
just screwing around, joking. I believe he is, people. So
no, certainly, but it is a huge debate, and it has been for over 10 years. But I'll tell you off air. So because there's certain things that I just, like I can divulge all sorts of things.
Absolutely, I don't want you looking over your shoulder. I promise.
No, correct, exactly. So, but yeah, at any rate, so I had gotten into it before, and then I got a copy of Building the Gymnastics Body by Christopher Sommer, and I just devoured it. And so in most of 2013, after I'd moved to Haifa, I skipped class because after I had, just annihilated the midterm for Hebrew, I was like, I do not need to be here. So I would just go to the beach in the morning. I would work out like on their pull-up bars and dip bars or whatever. And so I was doing all sorts of straight arm strength training stuff. And, I ended up finding that I could do some really crazy, like oddball stuff. Like I could do a SOTS press with a pair of 28 kilo bells, which was at like maybe 160 pounds of body weight, which is absurd.
What? Wow.
Yes. There's a video. It's a very ugly press, but it was like definitely the most max effort thing I've ever done. I think it took me 13 seconds to lock out. It was just hard as hell. And I did it in my underwear too. So folks, if you're going to watch it, just, rest assured, you're going to see
let's make that go viral, everybody.
Yes, please. So, but at any rate, and I didn't practice SOTS presses. I'd only tried them once as kind of as a joke. And I did a pair of 16s and I was like, oh, that was really hard. And then this was several months later. So I found, all this straight arm work that I'd been doing was paying off in dividends. And so I was really enthusiastic about it. And, I'm sure I spoke with Pavel about it at some point. And so he had me out to teach it. And so that brings us back to, May of 2015 and all that. But yeah, and then later in the year, I got a chance to go to Australia to teach as well. Still, I would say probably the best trip I've ever made of any place ever. Australia was just so much fun. But like I said, when things are going well, one of two things can happen. You can either continue to coax it in that direction, or much more common, you can screw it up. And so I chose the latter because I was young and I just didn't know any better. But I started, and I want to preface this by saying that I am not going to talk trash about anybody. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. Okay. But I started dating a gal that I had, we had started talking on Instagram. We were in kind of the same world. She was very interested in kettlebell training and strength training and what have you. And she lived in a Central European country that I would fly to regularly. Like I had plans at one point to actually be in said country. And so I proposed that. I was like, well, I'm going to be there anyway. So, how about we meet up and, hang out or whatever. We really hit it off. Things went very well. And, I think with any such experience, when you meet somebody that you really like, you have to be very clear about who you are as a person and what your own goals are and what your own ambitions are. And you can't be too quick to let those things go for the sake of somebody else. I think that if it's really meant to be, you should be able to continue going down the path you're on and not break away from that path.
Yes.
She never asked me to do that. I want to make that very clear. So I'm not blaming anything on her. I take 100% responsibility, but because I really liked her and I was willing to overlook certain red flags that presented themselves. Because when you're in love, red flags look like Six Flags.
Yes.
So what happened was, a lot of the opportunities that I had to go and teach abroad, I wasn't seeking them out anymore. So I wasn't seeking out, going and expanding my brand even further and what have you, because I was just trying to make sure that I was going to Europe more regularly to see her. And as time went on, it was like I was neglecting more and more the thing that I had spent all this time building up. And so ultimately, the goal then was that I was going to move to this country, and I was going to become an English teacher so that I could be with her. And the only way, now I had an online business at the time. It was very fledgling. I had my inner circle, which exists to this day. It's a monthly paid newsletter where I dive into a different topic each month, and there's a program and everything. And I'm not trying to sell people on the inner circle. I'm just giving them an idea of what it was. So I did have back in 2016, I had begun the online portion of my business. But as it turns out, in the European Union, unless you have some sort of like a residency permit, you can only be there for 90 days out of 180 days. So that would mean if I did not have like a work permit or something like that, I would be there illegally for, half the time, essentially. So, I actually got hired at a very well-known English language teaching company. And I think they have branches in a variety of countries as well. And it was, and so at this time, it was kind of like I was not taking on any new clients. I had started introducing my other clients, or my current clients, to the guy who would become my replacement, a friend of mine named David Ben Moshe, who had just moved to Israel at the time. And by the way, he would be another good guy to get on. Just as a complete side note, he's a very interesting guy. So I was introducing my old students to him, and so I thought, okay, this is a perfect way to wrap things up. I'm not leaving anybody high and dry. I'm going to go, to Europe and then live happily ever after. And then it was about what would have been maybe 3 to 4 weeks before I ostensibly would have moved. She was like, "Yeah, I don't really want you to move here anymore." And I had, at this point, I had basically shuttered my business. I really only had enough people. I didn't have like a physical location. I would actually go to people's place to train them. So I'm saying this metaphorically, but I really only was making enough to keep the lights on. My lease at my apartment had ended, so I was living with friends, and I was bouncing back and forth between several different places because, sometimes people would have company and then I would have to go sleep someplace else. And it was very, people use the word humbling, like left and right. And I hate it. Like I've talked about this before. People say humbled and honored. Like these two things are just completely mutually exclusive, number one. Number two, it's not usually what they mean. But it was a very humbling experience to know that everything was gone practically. I had only a few things that I could hold on to anymore because in order for me to rebuild my training practice to where it had been before would have taken probably 2 years, because that's what it roughly took in order for me to have a decent number of students to begin with. So I was like, it was the only time in my life where I felt like I was at a crossroads and I didn't know where either of the roads went, because the way I saw it is I could either move to Rishon LeZion, which is in central Israel, where a friend of mine owned a gym, get a job working there and then just kind of, fade away. And the other option is I thought, well, maybe I'll move to Berlin, teach English because this is the path that I've started down, and just kind of fade away. And so I didn't think, I thought, I'll keep doing the inner circle because I don't want to let go of that. But it just seemed like it was going to be something that I was doing out of obligation, because I'm very much a person who, when I start something, I will see it through to the bitter end, which is, on the one hand, it's a good trait to have, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur. But if you want to be in a relationship, sometimes you got to realize that the bitter end is a lot more bitter than you would think. So, like I said, a lot of the signs that I should have just, cut my losses and run happened probably a year and a half before. And I was with this gal for about 2 years. And again, I'm not saying anything I'm not blaming her, because I made these decisions. And, I don't expect anybody to stand up and be like, you should really do this. Least of all her, it was not her job to do that. But again, it's like when you really love somebody, it can be much easier to overlook the things and say, you know what, we can deal with that at a different time. Maybe this won't be such a problem, but it doesn't really work like that. So, so I was really at a loss. I was just in a kind of a holding pattern. I had no clue what I was going to do next. And my friend Pat Flynn, I had known him for many years, and I'll give you just a quick backstory. He and I had been in contact for probably at least since 2012, and we had plans to do like an ebook together. And we'd been in contact. We kind of started working on the ebook, and I met him for the first time in 2014 when I was in New York for the first original strength certification in New York City, and he lived in Pennsylvania at the time, and so it was like a 2-hour train ride to to where he lived. And he was like, well, if you're going to be on the East Coast, come out and visit. You can stay with me and Christine, and and what have you. And their first son had just been born, and I was like, yeah, okay, great. I'll come out. I'll visit. It'll be a fun time. We had a blast. I hung out with them for a good couple of days, and we just had a ton of fun. And as it turned out, I would be there again in, I think, maybe April of 2014. And so I went there and again, because he was going to be doing a workshop called Killing It with Kettlebells, which is a mix of teaching, refining the kettlebell skills, but then also teaching you how to be a more effective businessman in the world of personal training. So I went there and I assisted at the workshop. And again, we just got along famously. We had just had so much fun. And so it became kind of a tradition. I would see him every time I would come back to the States, because I always flew through JFK in New York. And so now fast forward to 2017, everything had crumbled before me, and it was looking really, really likely that I was just going to have to, again, not quit everything, but just sort of fade away. Like that just seemed like that was what was going to happen. And I didn't have a lot of business acumen other than my background in Cutco, for instance, right? And so, yeah, I was just like, I guess this is it. And I was kind of just accepting that this was probably going to be my fate. The only real thread that I was holding on to was the inner circle, because I didn't want to give that up. I felt like, again, because I see things through to the bitter end, for better or for worse. And it seemed like, okay, well, this is just the way it's going to have to be. So at one point, Pat and I would talk pretty regularly, even when I lived in Israel. And yeah, so he's like, yeah, how you doing? And I was like, yeah, so-and-so left me. And he's like, oh man, I'm really sorry to hear that. And then he's like, so we got on a call, and it was on the call that I mentioned it. And he's like, well, listen, how about this? What if you move to Pennsylvania? You can stay with me and Christine as long as you need to get on your feet, and I will help you with your online business. And I was like, let me get back to you on that. Because, when it rains, it pours. And it's like, I had just gotten out of one relationship, and, I'm a man, so my eyes are still like, window shopping, like, for other women. And there was one gal who I thought was very cool. And I was like, I need to ask her out on a date, because I'm going to hate myself if I don't do it. Again, bitter end kind of a person. It was like, I absolutely have to do it. So I asked her on a date. She said no. I said, Pat, let's do it. I'm coming to Pennsylvania. And
shout out to that girl. Awesome.
Yes, much appreciated. And I do still hear from her from time to time. She's a very nice gal. She was just, I think she was also, number one, she's not interested. I'm not going to, make any excuses, but she just didn't see me in the dating kind of way, which was very, very fortunate for me. But it was that moment, that rejection, that I was like, you know what, I can't be focusing on just trying to replace this other gal. I really need to get my life back on track. And then, like I said, when it rains, it pours. There was another gal that I had known for many years, and I had actually taught her English, believe it or not, when she was first moved to Israel. And I had always kind of had a crush on her, and I didn't know she had a crush on me, but she had a boyfriend. So for me, it was like I was still, nothing but professional, like never, it was never going to be anything other than just professional, because I wasn't going to get in the way of somebody else's relationship. But she was at that point kind of on the outs with him, and she had basically already decided that they were going to break up. And so, we started to hang out. Nothing happened because I was like, they're still dating. I can't do it. And that was when it was really clearest to me that it was like, I really need to focus on getting everything back to where it needed to be, and not taking the same steps that I've been taking, which was the path that it was like Luke Skywalker. I hear you can go to the light side, which is going to be really hard and it's going to suck, or you can go to the dark side, which is really easy. Your dad's already there. You know what I mean? Like, so it was kind of like, for me, the dark side, as it were, was just going to be doing the same thing that I had been doing that got me to where I was.
Right.
All I knew is I did not want to be where I was anymore. And it made no difference, how much I liked this gal. And because she was a real cat, she's a wonderful woman. But it was like, I need to go to the States, and I need to do this. So, but it was very tough. I arrived back into the US on November 1st, 2017. And then I arrived in Pennsylvania in the day after, and Pat picked me up from the train station, where I had like 150 pounds worth of luggage with me because I had all my books and all this other stuff and clothing. And he helped me. He helped me bring it to his place. I stayed in their spare room. His wife is the real star of the story, honestly, because any friend would do that for their friend, but for that friend's wife to be like, yeah, you know what, like, you can stay here for a couple months.
Yeah.
Why not? We have 3 kids, but why not? You go ahead, you can stay here. So yeah, it was quite an experience. But what was really interesting is that even though I was in many ways, just a shade above square one again, I felt like I had a sense of hope. I was like, okay, like I didn't have this opportunity in Israel to be around somebody who's as successful and as driven and as focused as Pat.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to use everything I can out of this opportunity. And again, like there's a pattern. The first 2 years back in the States, it sucked, right? The first year and a half, 2 years in Israel was really tough. But it got easier as time went on, and I started to build up my online business. I conferred with him on a lot of different things. I mean, he really, like, in a very short period of time, helped me go from, being wantrepreneur to an entrepreneur. And I was able to, ask him questions. I was able to hang around with some of the other people in our friends group, like, another friend of mine, Sam Sichter, who runs the Dragon Gym, the very famous gym in Exton, Pennsylvania.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to use this experience from going from the brink of really just cashing my chips in because I had no other choice, to now where I'm doing very, very well. And I've made some huge leaps. Again, it's been a really long, kind of rocky road to get to where I was going. But because I'm somebody who I don't want to quit at anything, it was something that I had to do. And I didn't hate it at all. It's not like I did it out of just sheer, obligation or solemn, whatever. It was something that I felt like, this is the impact that I want to make on the world. I want people to know, like, I, who grew up as this sort of goofy and awkward, unathletic person, through a lot of hard-won, experiences and research, I was able to figure out how to become stronger and fitter and healthier. I was able to learn how to teach these things to other people. Like, this is my mission. This is what I have to do, and I can't let anything get in the way. And again, it's very easy to allow things to get in the way when you're not as focused as you should be. Reality is, anybody else who's joining your life, whether it's somebody that you want to date or get married to, should enhance that, because I think that's part and parcel of it. And the problem, the issue, the mistake that I made was that I was willing to let it go because I looked at these things as being mutually exclusive. And I think a lot of times what happens is that people will say, like, things are going really well with this gal, but the only way that they're going to keep going well is if I kind of give up doing all these other things. Now, if it's drinking with your buddies and, like binge watching stuff on Netflix or playing video games all night long. Okay, well, those are hobbies that are not actually pushing your career forward or making you a more valuable person.
Right. You can see those a little easier coming down the line.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
if it's something like your business or your mission, your purpose in life, you really can't give those up for anybody. And I don't care how much hate mail I get as a result. Like, it just doesn't make any difference. I think any reasonable person would certainly agree to that.
Yeah, there's so many amazing lessons from the story there that you can unpack from there. A couple things that just popped out, like, right there, Deida from his book, The Way of the Superior Man, is about always living your highest purpose. And that is the number one thing. And it's like, you have your family, you have other things, but that is the ultimate thing. Like, everything else should be enhancing that. Yeah. But when you mentioned that about, when Pat offered you, that opportunity, it's like those gift horses that come to us a lot. There's a great line by Julia Cameron in her book, The Artist's Way, of that all gift horses are looked in the mouth and often return to sender. It's because it's not as much that we're afraid of failing, but we're afraid of the massive success. And it's like, it's kind of like along that same line of, sometimes these things just get thrown in your way. You can, and you can have different belief systems of this. This could be divine intervention. This could be, faith. This could be just cosmos, whatever you want to call it. It's like, if this is really your highest purpose, things are going to come in your way that's going to help you in that. And very easy, especially as, I think especially as guys too, is like to hold that pride in there of like, no, I can, lift yourself up from your bootstraps. I can get this done and stuff. But it's like, no, those things are out there to help you. And it's like, so to see those things and not, overthink it. Maybe it is one thing, like, let me get right back to you. It's like, I got to do this one thing or so, but kind of probably in your head, I would assume like you knew like, no, this is a right move to do.
Yeah. And in fact, it's funny because I remember going out and hanging out with this guy. I wouldn't call it a date because we didn't agree that it was a date. We were just hanging out. And prior to that, I don't think she even realized that I was interested in her, because again, I had this way of, I think, being a little subdued. I'm much better now at making my intentions a little clearer. Like now I would just say, look, let's go out on a date. Instead, I had to wait like until after I hung out with her like twice. And, but at any rate, like there were certain things that she was saying during the time we were hanging out. And this is not me criticizing or anything like that, but it was just things that I think would have disqualified a relationship in any case. And I was like, I remember thinking to myself, like, probably isn't even a good idea to ask her out, but I have to do it because I just said I'm going to do it. And, and again, eventually you start to learn that, like, I think never quitting and never giving up, I think it's a very good skill to have. And I think it's a very good characteristic to have. But every skill and every characteristic and every, gift that you have is always going to be a double-edged sword, because things done in excess will almost always become their opposites. And so it's like, from the training perspective, let's say you're really good at military pressing and bench pressing and push-ups and all this other stuff, and you do that to the exclusion of an adequate amount of pulling movements, your shoulders are going to start to hurt eventually.
Yes.
Your elbows, and so you're gonna suffer as a result of simply overindulging in your gift or the thing that you're good at. And it was always in my head like, this is probably what I really need to do. But because I had it in my head first that I'm going to ask this gal out, I need to do that first, and then I'll decide.
Mm-hmm.
But you're absolutely right. I think for men in particular, I think it's very difficult for men to ask for help. And I mean, like my dad, for instance, is very much like this, but it works very well for him because he's just of the mindset that, like, okay, well, if I need to, learn how to do this in order to do that, I'll just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if he's not really in a creative field, and that's not a criticism. I'm just saying he's like, it's just not, the field that he's in. It's something that's doesn't really require as much creativity. It requires knowledge and it requires skill and what he does, but he doesn't have to write books or articles and all these other things.
Right.
So I feel like for me, like so much of my brain power goes into those things that it's like I really just don't want to learn a ton of other things. I'm not opposed to it. It's just not a necessity. Like we were talking about this before, right?
Yeah.
But I had the mindset before that's kind of what I had to do. I had to do everything on my own because that's just the way that you do it. I remember toward the end of my time living in Israel, because I did this the whole time I was there. And of course, it was like, life got very difficult because there were a lot of times, particularly in a country like Israel, where cost of living is higher, people don't make as much money. It's not like, it's not like the US in terms of comfortable living.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say you can't live comfortably there, because many people do. But if you're an immigrant in particular, it's like, it just takes longer to build up your network and,
right.
And I knew plenty of people. So, but again, I didn't utilize a lot of those, a lot of them like I could have. And I have a friend of mine who was former special forces, very like manly dude, martial artist, all this stuff. He was like, I think he asked something had happened, and I just was going to try to take care of it on my own, and I was completely incapable of doing it. And he's like, why don't you just ask for my help? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, he's like, look, I want to help you. And if you don't ask for my help when you need it, I'm going to start getting mad. And I was like, he's right. Like, there's really no reason for me to try to reinvent the wheel every time I need to get something done. Like if somebody can help me, it's basically just, it's the smart thing to do. There's nothing like, there's nothing unmanly. I wasn't doing it to try to be manly, but it's like, there's nothing unmanly or untoward about asking for help when you need it. And so that, him just saying that one thing really made a big impact, because it made me think, like, how many things am I doing the hard way because I just don't want to do it any other way. I want to be able to say I conquered it. You can only do that so many times. And again, if you depending on your situation or your circumstances, you might have better luck with it for certain things. But like, yeah, it was at that moment that I decided I was going to start to ask for help more often. And I think, that was also right around the time, I don't remember if it was before or after or what, but I think it was right around the time that Pat invited me to move to Pennsylvania. And, and maybe if I hadn't had that conversation with him, I don't know what I would have done, to be very honest. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Well, and it's, when you think about it too, if like everything that we do in this world, like there's a connection of some point. I mean, going back to when you had your year of yes, where you're just saying yes to everything, right? It's like, if you go along that path of I'm going to do everything myself, right? If somebody offered to do, ask you if you would do this in Australia, well, if you're in that mindset, you'd be like, no, forget that. I'm going to make my own thing and I'll figure out how to get to Australia on my own. It's like, no, dummy, the thing is right in front of you. Like,
exactly.
Go enjoy it. When I talked with Rebecca Rouse a little while ago on the podcast from Semper Stronger. Rebecca, an awesome girl, phenomenal person in the community. And she talked about like her year of yes, which I absolutely love. Like, if I'm asked to do any podcast, if I'm asked to write anything, if I'm asked to help anybody, just say yes. And I think it's a really good point, Aleks, because so much, especially if people who want to go into their own business or do their own thing, it's like, do only what you want to do. Like, that's the life. Like, you can do what you want to do. I'm like, there's really some merit to just saying yes to like everything in there. Like, yeah, maybe you're going to get stretched out a little thin for a little bit, but maybe you're going to find an avenue that you didn't even know was available to you, or a different connection. And I started doing that and then became, connected with somebody who's been huge to me and help is Brian Grasso and his partners program, who just being around him and the work that he's done of his development and stuff, all of a sudden you just get different ideas and different energy around. Yeah. And I think that's just, you can apply that to business. You can apply that to strength. You can apply that to anything. Like if it's just kind of in, watch Jim Carrey's Yes Man, get a little bit of
thinking about that. Yeah, exactly.
Just like those things of just kind of saying yes, even if you're not comfortable with it. It's kind of like your Cutco knife story. It's like you're building up a different skill of like seeing it from there. And it's an inspiring thing to see that, what you came from of like, not even thinking you were going to be a coach, to then building a brand, then moving all the way across the world into Israel, building it up again, and then losing it to even come back and do it again. The word that you hate, humbling in there, I could totally understand from it.
It works in this case. Normally I hate it because people misuse it, I was watching, this is just a very small side note. I was watching, one of my favorite comedians, Greg Giraldo. He was like one of the funniest people ever. And he had talking about, this is back in the early 2000s. He's like, there's going to be I think he said Puerto Rican lady on the Supreme Court. And I'm assuming he's talking about Sotomayor. I don't remember when she was installed or whatever, but I guess maybe this would have been the mid 2000s. But anyway, he's like, and she said that it was humbling to get the offer to join the Supreme Court. He's like, it's exactly the opposite. He's like, wow, it must have been a real kick in the face when the president called you and said he wanted to put you on the highest court of the land. So that's the problem that I have with people saying humble, is that it's like they just use it wrong. It's like,
it's like. What I think Dave Chappelle was the one, when it's like when people like praise you for that, instead of saying it, just be fun to just go back and be like, yep, well, I deserve it. It's like, because I'm awesome.
It's so much more fun to say that because people don't expect it, and it's like funny, But yeah, it's also better that I hate this fake like humility and magnanimity. It's like some people are humble to a fault, and it's genuine. Other people are doing it because they think that they ought to. I like to just, like be sort of comical, and somebody will be like, wow, that was awesome. I'll be like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And just to get a laugh out of them.
Exactly. Oh, I think I might start using, well, I think the best word, right, is grateful, right? I mean, you could say you're grateful, for it.
Of course, yeah. And that's for
the
sure.
Same type of thing. But no, I think what you express too is really the use of the word passion. I think that's one of those words that annoys me, as well,
Yeah.
as when we say I have a passion for something. And I remember talking with Dan John about this, and I love it. It's like, passion comes from the word, I think, passius, to suffer, which
Yeah.
like you suffered through it. So if you have a passion for it, but you never done it, you haven't suffered for anything. Like suffering through something and having a passion is when you do something, you build it up, and then you lose it, and then you build it back up again. Like that's going through some shit. You're going through some muck of getting there.
Absolutely.
And that's where, that's why strength training is exciting. It's like kind of learning something new and then seeing the beginning results that you get, but then going through the times where it's just, you're not seeing those quick results again. You don't lose body fat as fast as you did when you first started, tweaking in your nutrition, but getting through those times, that's when you really find a different type of passion. And that's when you really find, I think, what works best for you. Just you discover what is really the best path for you, because nobody can tell you exactly what this path is. We have principles of how to get there, but to really do this in a way that you really enjoy doing it on an everyday basis is you got to discover what's best for you. And going through a journey like you did, I would almost, kind of not wish that on anybody, because obviously there's a lot of pain for it, but at the same time, almost like knowing, like, step back and let them go through it, because you know what's going to happen at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, a lot of it is you have to make decisions along the way, no matter what. Like in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talks about, between stimulus and response, there's a time where you can make a choice. And, that was very helpful for me, actually, in moving past all that difficulty, because again, it's like everybody's going to go through heartbreaks. People are going to have difficult times in their life. And then the decision, and then you have to go through a time where you realize that everything that you do is based on a decision. Like everybody has habits, but we make a decision every day not to try to change those habits if they're good or bad. So, like when Pat offered me to move to Pennsylvania, and I was like, okay, well, let me think about it. Because if I had just said yes right then and there, the story would have ended pretty much the same way. But I hadn't completely committed to making a decision between the stimulus, the offer to move to Pennsylvania, and getting his extraordinarily generous offer, and then my decision to try to ask this other gal out on a date. It was a hard won decision for me, because I saw even after I'd asked her out and after she said no thank you, like how close I could have been if she had said yes. Like what would have happened next? Like maybe I would have been like I need to see it through to the end. I kind of owe it to her, so again, it was very serendipitous, and I didn't take it personally at all. I understood, she's got her reasons, and again, and she also had gone through a heartbreak recently too. So it was not like, it really wasn't anything that I took personally. I completely understood. But the point is that I was willing to continue making the same decision, only this time recognizing that I was doing what had previously been a habit. So now it was on my radar, and I made the decision anyway, and I could see myself doing it and how close I could have been to having to move in a different direction. And so then when this next gal came along, and regardless of the fact that I think we would have been like a far better match, I realized that it's still not the right decision, because it was not going to solve the problem that I had, because that problem wasn't going to go away until I made a different decision. Mm-hmm. And it took 2 years before I went from crap to suck, in my business skills. Mm-hmm. But it was every day I was just not going to quit. And I knew that was the appropriate use of my intention to see everything to the bitter end, because the end doesn't have to be bitter.
Yes.
But your stick-to-itiveness will determine where things go. And if things look like they're going in the wrong direction, there's no problem with, cutting your losses and saying, I'm going to do something different. That's a skill that everybody has to learn how to do. Mm-hmm. For other people, the skill they are going to have to learn how to do is see things through to the end. And, where I am now with what I'm doing, I feel like I'm only getting started, and I've been doing this since 2016. So it was really a very relatively small amount of time, mm-hmm. In terms of online business side of things. But yeah, I feel like I've still got a really long time to go before I really peak. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to say I'm doing very, very well mm-hmm. as it is right now. But yeah, it really does come back to that. You have to slow down, think about the decisions you're going to make. Am I going to take the easy route, which is kind of programmed into me? Or am I going to make one small decision that may be a little bit harder, but is going to kind of start to nudge me in the right direction so that I gain the strength to start making harder decisions as time goes on.
Right.
I can guide myself in the direction that I need to go.
Yeah. I think the concept of choice too, and making decisions, I think it's so important too, to know that you can make to actually explore making a bad decision or the wrong decision. It's kind of, Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung, mentions Carl Jung with the shadow work. And I've looked at that a lot in my own life, and I've talked with people about it, where to make actually a choice is to understand all the bad choices that you can make as well. Yeah. And actually spending some time of doing that, so really the only way to make the right choice for you is to also explore all of the bad choices that you can make as well. It's aligning yourself with the monstrous side of what you can do. Like, to be a good person, you have to also, the only way to choose to be a good person is to actually know that it's also a choice you can make to be a bad person and an asshole.
And you have to have the ability to do those things too. You're like, there's no I think he's mentioned, harmless people aren't virtuous, because you're virtuous if you have the ability to be harmful or violent or really terrible, and you choose not to be. Yes. It's why when we see somebody who's real alpha male, big, strong, tough, knows how to fight, whatever, and they're kind and they're caring, we appreciate that a lot more than when it's, somebody who's kind of let's say mousy and, harmless or whatever, because it's well, what other choice do you have? That's just, the default. You can't do anything else. But and the same thing applies not only with, developing yourself, your shadow, like you talked about, and like Jordan Peterson talks about a great deal, but really everything, you have the choice. And I think that the one thing that's sorely lacking for a lot of people today is the willingness to take personal responsibility, the willingness to say, okay, either it's not a priority for me to do this, so I'm just not going to do it, and then you're okay with it, versus I really want to do that, but I'm afraid of doing anything different, so I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done. Yes. We talked a little bit about language learning earlier. I really like learning languages, but I don't begrudge people if they don't want to learn any other languages, or if it's not a priority, it's not a priority. Right. But I respect that. If people say, yeah, I just don't really see the point. It's okay, yeah, there's no, I'm not incredulous or flabbergasted, but if somebody says, oh, I would love to learn Spanish, but I just, I don't think I have the time. Because the first thing I'll always say is I'll show them how they could make the time, and how it doesn't have to be something crazy. There are these free resources and this and that. And if that doesn't sway them, and then it's okay, well then just say it's not a priority. There's no shame in that, but don't lie and say oh, I would love to. Everybody would love to do all sorts of stuff that they're not willing to do.
Absolutely.
Just say it's not a priority. It's not, there's no shame in it. The shame is in lying about that. Lying to yourself, not to other people, but lying to yourself about it.
It's such an important concept, and I think it's just so important to have these conversations more and more about it, because it is. It comes down to, personal responsibility, but it's also it's okay to explore those other ideas that maybe you don't want to do, but it's just because if you explore it doesn't mean that now your willingness to do it. It's I think it's just it's a huge part in hearing a story like yours of, you could have very easily gone the other path. Who knows what, those girls could have said, and you would have been, or maybe they would have said yes. And right now off the top of your head, you'd be oh no, I really want to go to the States and do it. But that's how it happened, and that's how it works. So, and
things always could have been far worse. I'm fortunate that it was a painful experience, particularly the breakup at the time was a very painful experience. But yeah, it always could have been worse. There are a lot of things that could have gone far worse, and so it sucked. But I know people who've gone through far worse things, and and they've rebounded from it, and they've prospered regardless. So, but I think because it's so, particularly in the Western world, people live relatively comfortably. I think it's harder to convince people to do the things that are uncomfortable. And you don't have to be, I don't believe in this whole idea of you got to get outside your comfort zone. Matt Fury has a very interesting approach to that. And it's about, you expand your comfort zone by not stepping all the way outside of it, but you do like little things that end up, making bigger waves later on down the line. But yeah, some people are many people could make different decisions if they really wanted to. And I think they should be encouraged to do that. And they should understand that there is going to be some discomfort. And if you want to chase something like starting a business or learning a new skill or whatever, like it's just, there's always going to be some discomfort to it, because it's like, that's just kind of part and parcel with the experience. So we can't mistake discomfort for pain or discomfort for suffering. Passion, if you will. Incidentally, I don't think people should follow their passions for that precise reason, because it's like there is a lot of suffering that goes on. And if you're willing to take up that burden, go for it. But yeah, I think everybody can do more than they think. They just need to be encouraged. And that's one of the things I think as fitness professionals is our goal, is to get people to agree to doing something a little bit more than they would have otherwise, and then agree to continue to do that as time goes on. And that is where they end up doing stuff that otherwise would have been extremely uncomfortable, and has now become something that it's empowering and allows them to see themselves as more than just an object, but rather a subject, somebody who's making things happen, and somebody who can take the reins and steer their ship wherever they want to.
I think that's a good place to close out on this, man. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. It's always a blast to talk to you, really is. And there's even a million more things that I want to talk to you about, but we'll save it for another time and we'll get you going from there. So, dude, if people want to follow your stuff more, kind of get in, I know you have your 9-minute program that you have. What's the best place that we can direct them?
Yeah, I would say, okay, well, first and foremost, I love my parents dearly, but they gave me a very funny spelling name. So I'm going to give you 2 options. Okay. Now, number 1, you can go to 9minutechallenge.com. And that you can get my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge there. And incidentally, if you like original strength, you're going to like it, because it's very heavily influenced by some of the movements in original strength. It's oriented around like gait pattern movements that have a big impact on all the other exercises and stuff like that we like to do with kettlebells and calisthenics. But it's very gentle on the system, meaning you're not going to get completely burned out. So you can do it in conjunction with any other program that you're doing. You're probably just going to find that you'll move better, you'll feel better, you'll get stronger, you'll improve your stamina, your coordination. And again, as the name implies, it's only going to take 9 minutes. Now, if for some reason 9minutechallenge.com is too difficult to remember, or it slips your mind, you can always look me up online. Like I said, my parents spelled my name in a way that is, people think it's fake or stylized. It's not. It's like, it's genuinely spelled like this. Now, my name is Aleks, but it's not spelled A-L-E-X. No. It's A-L-E-K-S. K is in Catherine. S is in Samantha. We're talking a lot about girls earlier, so I figured I should use some female names to remind people. So A-L-E-K-S. My last name is Salkin. Okay. So like Jonas Salk, the guy who invented the polio vaccine, was it a polio vaccine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. S-A-L-K-I-N. So aleksalkin.com, ALEKS-SALKIN.com. So if you like a challenge and you want to be a little uncomfortable, you look that up, ALEKS-SALKIN.com. Otherwise, 9minutechallenge.com. And you will be whisked away into a world of strength and all sorts of other fun stuff.
Love it, man. So, dude, you're the best. I appreciate it, man. You're awesome.
My pleasure. And I'm glad I was able to give you the exclusive story, the true origin story of the Hebrew hammer.
It is. Oh, I think that's what we're going to call it.
Yes. Good. I hope people will enjoy it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like the show, please give it a 5-star review, give it a thumbs up, all that good stuff. And if you want to get the inside scoop on all new episodes coming up, behind the scenes insights, and free training resources, then you can join the Strength Connection private Facebook group now. Just go to Facebook groups, type in the Strength Connection, and join in. Also, don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.